Okay, I think Kim is asking people to come in. Thanks so much. We can start, Kim. Is that okay? Perfect. Thank you. Our next speaker is Frank Jaskulke, Vice President of Intelligence at the Medical Alley Association, where he's responsible for Medical Alley Starts, the association's initiative to lower the cost of starting, scaling, and pivoting new ventures. Frank also leads the Medical Alley Global and International Business Development Platform, and he serves as a member of the Medical Alley Senior Leadership Team. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. Hey, all right, so first off, how many people like McDonald's? Anyone? Yeah? What about statins? How many people like statins? Yeah, some of us. I like saying, like, I want McDonald's, I need statins, but unfortunately, one is easier to get than the other. So convenience is very guttural. Like, it's not a rational thing. People, unlike us, don't spend all day thinking about health, right? They actually try to avoid thinking about it. But when we get threatened, when something goes wrong, we'll think a lot about it. But if you make something really, really hard to do, which pretty much everything in healthcare is hard and complex, and for good reasons in most cases. You can create cognitive overload, and people will make decisions that really aren't rational or don't make sense. That is why we will spend lots of money very easily at McDonald's, but maybe not spend as much money or time or effort staying adherent to our medications. Healthcare is realizing this. There is growing investment in making healthcare more convenient. Now, it's not always convenient in the way that the individual consumer or the patient may want it, but I'll say it is going in the right direction, and the pace seems to be picking up. But not everywhere. Not everyone is caught up. Real story. I take a statin, and periodically I need to go see my doc in order to get the prescription refilled. Funny thing, I did not know that. I did not know to refill my prescription, I periodically had to see my doc. So my script runs out, I go on to capsule, I have a little text with my pharmacist, like, refill my script. Like, we can't, you have to see your doctor first. It's like, oh, good to know, inconvenient. I'm like, I'll go schedule an appointment. Inconvenient. I can schedule an online appointment with my health system. I cannot schedule an appointment online with my cardiologist. I have to call on the phone between the hours of 8:30 and 4:30, Monday through Friday, which also happen to be hours when I'm working. And since I'm in an external facing role, my job is to stuff my calendar as packed as possible. So finding the time to sit on hold and schedule that appointment so I can refill the script that we all know I'm going to get refilled is super inconvenient, and it was really, really difficult. Thankfully, it turns out once I had the appointment scheduled, I could get the medicine refilled, and I've got my medicines, taking them today. Right, I'll take them about an hour after this thing finishes. But that was a little scary at first, that I was like, I'm gonna run out of this medication. Those of you who know anything about statins, it's like, they're great, but it's kind of not fun when you first start taking them. Like, it gives you a really weird feeling for a while, right? I didn't want to go through that again. We all have this challenge in healthcare, though, and really in anything in business that we're doing. We are so freaking busy. We are so programmed. My calendar is stuffed. You are all busy. That quite often we're too busy to make things better. We're too busy to do what you advised and go and talk to the customer and find out what they really value. And it may not be affordability, access, quality, or the outcome of care. It may be that I can just book the appointment really easily without a lot of hassle and sitting on wait. I'm constantly reminded of a remark that a hospital executive once made to us, that healthcare is really an asset business and real estate is this millstone. That there is such a huge investment we have all made in healthcare in building physical infrastructure in which the patient comes to us, and we now need to maintain that infrastructure, right? That infrastructure is driving decision-making in many cases, the tail wagging the dog. And that makes it much harder for us to make those changes that we all know would be more convenient. There's a big problem, though. There are a lot of new entrants coming into healthcare that are not stuck with that millstone around their neck. And they are coming for healthcare as we know it. And I will tell you, here in Minnesota, here in Medical Alley, the global epicenter of health innovation and care, we have more riding on that change than anywhere else on earth. If disruption to healthcare comes from somewhere else, we as a community have the most to lose in that situation. And if we're the ones to figure it out, we have more to gain than anywhere else on earth. Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of companies are trying to bring more convenient care, and from time to time are winning in the market, not because their care is better or because it costs less, but because I can schedule an appointment when my lizard brain kicks in and is like, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to get that strip refilled if I don't see the doc. They've made it easy to do, and I do that and I get my strip refilled. They're winning on that. This is sort of classic innovator's dilemma, like the business book that we've all read, that we all know and love, and that in actually so many ways is written about Minnesota, right? What is it about? The hard drive industry that grew up in and around this university campus with companies like Sperry, Rand, Unisys, companies that really aren't around anymore, or not around in the same way. IBM's largest facility on earth is the one in Rochester. Control Data was a Fortune 500 fast-growing company that most people don't even know existed at any point, especially if it's a newer generation. That innovator's dilemma of these companies that come up not with a better product, but with a product that meets a customer need that you're not serving today, and slowly eats your foundation out from the bottom, and over time moves up market. And sometimes even you give them that market. You're like, those are our lower margin customers. They're less important. Cool. We get rid of them and our profits go up for a bit. Until one day we wake up and we find out the foundation is rotten and the whole thing collapses and a new industry emerges. It happens over and over again. And as was pointed out earlier, right, we know healthcare is complex and is regulated. So is almost every other industry, right? Financial services, incredible regulation. And right now going through incredible disruption. I mean, I can remember my parents growing up, how did they check their bank account? They were so excited when they could call Norwest instead of going to the bank to check how much was in there and verify if they had balanced their checkbook right. Can you imagine today calling your bank to ask them how much money do I have? Right? That is still our experience in healthcare today. So what do I suggest? I go with some of the wisest people in the world. Don't hate the game, play or hate the game, and then change the game. We have an opportunity as a community to make this better. We are the people who built the system for better and for worse. We can be the people to make it better than it is today. One of the ways that we're doing that as your community association is through our Medical Alley Starts initiative, where we're seeking to lower the cost for new startups to get off the ground in this ecosystem and bring new disruptive innovations that your companies might partner with or might acquire. We do this with a whole range of services. I won't belabor the point on these, but time and time again, what it comes down to is getting the right person to the right person at the right time so they can gain knowledge and move their business forward. We're supported in this with an incredible group of entrepreneurs and investors who collectively have generated hundreds of billions of dollars in value, building and transforming the healthcare system. One person on this thing was responsible for 40% of all health insurance in the United States. It was out of a teeny little office in St. Louis Park that was done, right? This is the place that created Medtronic, created United Health Group, the Mayo Clinic, HMOs, all of these different things. We want to make sure the next generation does it again, cognizant of the way the world is today. The second way we're doing it is what we call the Healthcare Transformation Initiative. The question was asked earlier about value-based care and will it ever happen? I mean, it is happening, just maybe not in the way we've sometimes defined value-based care, right, as like paying for an outcome. Value-based care can mean a lot of different things to different people depending on their needs as an individual. And there are players serving those needs, but maybe not in the ways we think about it if we're locked into this idea of CMS policy drives all activity, which, to be fair, whether you're device, drug, payer, provider, pharmacy, CMS policy kind of drives all of our decision making in one way or another. There are a lot of groups not bound by that who are disrupting. So what are we doing? Well, Minnesota is uniquely positioned as the only place on earth where you have truly world leaders, number ones in every part of healthcare imaginable, and they're all neighbors. They coach each other's kids' baseball teams. They work together. They grew up together. They have a high level of trust that makes it easier to work on those complex problems that may mean I got to give up some of my revenue to get to a better outcome. So we're leveraging that continuum of care, the payer, provider, and technology firms, to drive new policy positions, not a policy position driven by device companies or driven by payers or driven by drug companies, but driven by the entirety of healthcare with the patient in the center, in order to come up with new models of paying for care, delivering care, developing new technologies, all out of this community. We've started in two very small areas. We're working on health equity issues in Minnesota and in supply chain. And I'll tell you, we started on supply chain in 2016, not anticipating what would happen to global healthcare supply chains. And it was truly amazing to see this community where all of the different parts of healthcare came together and kind of figured out how to make it work. Not always really well, right? We were dealing with unprecedented times, as has been said too many times. But we saw situations where, like, large medical manufacturers who had medical equipment in their test labs that was needed in the hospital worked with the FDA to figure out how to clean it up, validate it, and get it to patient care, because that was more important than doing the study that they had been working on. And that came from the high level of trust that all of you had with your neighbors to come up with better solutions. So we're working on health equity issues, and I have to give major plaudits to the Catalyst program and what you all have done. We're working on supply chain issues, and then with our STARTS program, working on strategic business development to get early stage startups that are working in disruptive areas in front of the large strategics that have the capital to see those solutions move forward, but sometimes are stuck in existing business models and need someone from the outside to shake it up a little bit. And so with that, I'll stop talking at you and ask if you have any questions. Thank you. Excuse me. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Any questions for Frank? Online as well.
Hey, stump. Oh, say stumped you, darn.
What has some of the reaction been from the larger incumbents in our ecosystem when you've tried to pair them with an early stage company that maybe could be a productive partner, maybe it's a threat, long run, it's kind of a gray area. What has been the general reaction, and maybe it's varied, so there's not one answer. But
yeah, the general reaction is it's varied, but it's varied and it's been positive. What we're finding is there is an issue of transparency, not intentional, not like people hiding things, but that the market goals, the business goals, the way companies operate, the large firms, is not always well understood by those in the innovator companies, even if they've come out of those firms. You may have people who have come from one sector of healthcare now working in another, and they don't have that full appreciation of how a Medtronic or how a Blue Cross makes decisions or their real problems. So we've spent a lot of time on just increasing communication so those innovator companies understand what the problems are from the side of the large companies and vice versa. In doing that, stupidly simple, which is my favorite phrase, in doing that, we've helped our member companies find acquisitions, make investments, come onto boards. Collectively, it's been a couple of $2 billion worth of value of like capital deployed, and that's been in only 2 years of work from stupidly simple, hey, you should talk with this other person about X. That simple, and no fees on there, not an investment bank, not a broker.
Frank, thank you for all the good work you're doing and Medical Alley has done for the state and for the innovator community. My question is, venture capital funds available? Because for innovation to happen, early stage companies need financial support. So the question is two-pronged. One, are you seeing VC firms coming to Minnesota or leaving Minnesota because there are competitive markets like Tennessee, Nashville, and San Diego and Massachusetts? And the other one is, are major companies creating innovation funds? Do they fund these initiatives in the marketplace?
Yeah, so on the first one, as a general statement, The total amount of capital deployed into healthcare startups in Medical Alley in Minnesota has increased over the last 10 years at a pretty healthy clip. We're now doing in an average quarter $300 to $500 million, which is what we used to do 10 years ago in a full year. So capital has been going up. Second part of that is this is a lower cost market to operate. If you run a startup here, $1 here is like deploying $2 into a California company. And I always think back to my old boss, Dale Wallstrom, who's a Medtronic executive, where they would buy companies in California and find they needed to plop them here because the ecosystem here was stronger at turning an idea into a commercializable product. That has attracted mass amounts of interest from venture capital in digital health and diagnostic and device, and even in biotech, where we're seeing a growing amount of capital coming into like advanced therapeutics, which there's some unique capabilities right here. So on the first part, capital is coming in, the pace of it is increasing, we feel very good about it. I think people should always recognize that venture capital is also an industry. 50% of global capital is located in 3 cities in the United States. If you're a Minnesota company raising money, you go to San Jose, Boston, and New York, and then you bring that capital back on a FedEx truck right here to Medical Alley, right? Best place to spend the money right here. On the second part of your question, most of the large companies or the strategics have investment activities that they're doing, very common in the drug world, very common in the device world, increasingly common in the payer and even provider world. I would say in that order, right? Device and drug have long had that as part of their strategies. The payer world, it's increasingly happening. The provider world, it's a little bit harder because healthcare providers tend to be just more regional in their work. It's harder to have a national venture capital presence if your market is defined by like 494 and 694, right? It's just, it doesn't work quite as well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Frank. For the sake of time, I apologize if there's additional questions, but we'll keep it moving.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Frank. Our next speaker is Mark Steffen. Dr. Mark Steffen is the Senior Vice President of Medical Management and Chief Medical Officer of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. We worked with Mark in many events at the Carlson School in the past too. Dr. Steffen oversees medical and care management strategies for the company's 2.5 million members and is responsible for leading their care management, health equity, population health, and affordability strategies, including their community-focused strategies. He joined Blue Cross in 2018 after spending several years in managed care where he focused on population health and value-based care, including 5 years at Mayo Clinic, where he served as the medical director of the Preventive Services Clinic and as the division chair for preventive occupational and aerospace medicine. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Bernard. So we've already had some great discussion about value-based care, and we're going to talk a little bit about our experience at Blue Cross with value-based care, some of what we've seen in the evolution of this, not only over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but over the decades. First, I think it's always helpful. Let's ground ourselves on the problem that we're trying to address. So you'll look at these numbers and you'll see I'm using data from 2015 to 2019. Why? Well, everybody knows COVID in 2020 hit and all the data is awful messy, awful noisy, and hard to make sense of. So we're going to take a little bit of a journey into the past to look to what occurred. I think as we emerge from the pandemic, we'll see some return to a new normal of medical spending, and I think it'll be fascinating to see where that lands and how it resumes. But if you go back to that 4-year period in 2015 to 2019, what were you seeing? Well, you're seeing healthcare costs that far outpace anything around consumer price index as well as GDP. And A lot of that is driven by both utilization as well as unit cost. And those are really the main drivers. They continue to be the main drivers that we see. Sarah gave a great talk about pharmaceutical costs and what they're doing with data. We're seeing continued acceleration in that space and in both of these areas, both unit cost and the amount of services delivered. The real problem is the fact on the right. So if you use CDC's Healthy Days, are people aware of what the CDC Healthy Days measures are? Essentially, every year they publish the BRFIS data that surveils all the risk factors of the population. They ask people, in the last 30 days, how many days have you been physically healthy, how many days have you been mentally healthy, and they calculate those. There's no real great way to measure large-scale population health. I think the BRFIS measure and the CDC Healthy Days measures can be one of those ways. But what's clear is, from 2015 to 2019, people had more unhealthy days. We spent a lot more at a faster rate. We got more health care, but we weren't getting more health. And that's the problem. And that's really what we try to solve with value-based care. And historically, value-based care has really been just simplified into, quality over cost. How much quality am I getting for cost? I think it's really better to start to think about measuring how much health am I getting for my cost. And to Frank's point around the experience of refilling a statin prescription, what's the experience of that? Because expectations are rapidly changing. And so, it's a component of all of these things. What's the outcome? What's the experience I had? And how much did it cost me to do that? And it's really clear that we all can and need to do better. So when people talk about value-based care, what do they automatically reflex to? They automatically reflex to the payment model. This is problematic. Now, payment models are important, but they are a function that helps drive value-based care. So, if you just create, it's a little bit of, if you build it, they will come. It's just not true in value-based care, and I think that has been the problem that we've been trying to deal with over the last several decades. We thought, well, we'll create a payment model that's around value-based care, and then we're going to expect the care model that's being delivered to the patients to change. And the truth is that's hard. So we're historically steeped. I was trained here at the University of Minnesota, and we have been very set in our ways in how we train physicians in our healthcare system, how we deploy that care, and it's really been service-driven rather than population health-driven. And at Blue Cross, we span the spectrum of these payment models. So let's talk a little bit about what these are. If you go all the way over on the left to the fee-for-service, this is very simple. I do something, you pay me for that something. If you go all the way over to the right to a population health level payment, and you take that to the far extreme, it's, I'm going to give you a set of dollars, and you're going to take care of all of the healthcare costs and all of the health of this individual. You don't get more. If they get sick, there's no additional payment. You have to make sure that you assume those costs across the population. And then there's everywhere in between. If you look at the value-based care models that have been in the market for the last 30 years, they've been traditionally in the fee-for-service that's linked to quality and typically in the form of some type of bonus payment. If we track how many diabetics got their hemoglobin A1C measure and you hit a certain percent, we're going to call that delivering good quality care. We're going to make an additional payment to you. We're not going to withhold any payment. You're still going to get all of your fee-for-service payment, but we're going to make an additional payment because we believe you're delivering high value or high quality care. Great in principle. But did we see a lot of care model change with that? No. As we transitioned into sort of this bundled payment system. So APMS is really a term for bundled payments. We saw a lot more evolution in models. So this is things like I'm going to pay for a specific service, a joint replacement. I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars. You're going to replace the joint, and you're going to take care of some of the aftercare after they get the surgery. And you started to see care models change. People thought about how long they were keeping patients in the hospital. They were discharging them to home sooner. They were doing home physical therapy immediately to get them moving. As you shift over to the right, this is where I really think that we've seen evolution, momentum, and success in value-based care. And that's where you look at the far end of a spectrum, a global payment. Here's a population of people. I'm going to give you 1,000 people. You're going to take care of every single one of those people. And this is the bucket of money that you have to do that. What does it allow those people to do? Well, it allows them to make different choices. And Andy talked about some of this. Rather than delivering a service and then billing the insurance company for whatever medical visit it might be, they might say, you know what this population needs is access to healthy foods. And so I'm going to find ways to deliver healthy foods to those individuals, lower their healthcare costs in total, and I don't need to create some payment methodology to do that because I've got sort of this global payment. I'm getting paid the same no matter what, so I can solely focus on health improvement. So what are the impacts? And I think it's true. There was a question earlier about, are we going to see success with value-based care? And I think we're starting to get there. What do we know from our own information? If we at Blue Cross take one of our members and put them into a value-based care provider, that we have a value-based agreement, particularly the ones that fall on the right side of the spectrum that we looked at, we know that their average monthly costs are going to drop about 6.3% compared to a non-value-based or a fee-for-service provider. So we know that to be true. What's a little more difficult? Well, it's tracking down the outcomes. I can look at outcomes at a claims base, right? I don't have access to all of the electronic medical record information that might give me a rich amount of information, although that world is changing as well. But I can look at those claims to start to assess sort of, a couple quality components here, a couple quality components there. But a lot of the things that we want to do with population health, these take time to add up, and it really takes time to see some of those larger global health changes. The other thing that somebody mentioned, what's important in partnerships, and I'll tell you, as we've looked at our value-based partnerships, the ones that are most successful are mission-grounded. So if we start with the mission of we want to improve the health of people and lower the cost of care, and we just start with that focus, we're able to build not only a payment model around that, but we're also able to provide support systems. So we do a lot of things well in the payer world. We have a ton of data. We have very smart people that analyze that data and can derive insights that can help support care delivery. And as we get deeper into these value-based models and agreements with providers, we're more often sharing that information and making it more seamless to access, and that really does have downstream impacts on the experience. So, people are able to access the care that they need faster. The administrative barriers that can sometimes get in the way of care are lessened. And we see better experiences for people. We certainly see lower healthcare costs, and we're starting to see some of those outcome build at the more discrete individual level. So I'm going to pause there. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. Happy to answer those.
Any questions either in the room or online?
Thank you, Mark, for that presentation. I have a question regarding, you mentioned two things. So one is that your value-based network, who are more mission-grounded, are more successful. Do you have ways, or does BCBS have ways of identifying who those centers of excellence are? And have you seen that benefit changes for those centers of excellence is leading to more members going through those networks?
Yeah, so two things. We have at Blue Cross what we call a high-value network that's nationwide, not just in Minnesota, but there's Minnesota providers within that network. And we can look at the global data and see the outcome differentials in those. We do have centers of excellence that are for specific disease conditions, musculoskeletal joint replacement center of excellences, transplant. So we do use that and really try to monitor at a pretty granular level the quality outputs of those centers of excellence and refresh those over time to ensure that people are continuing to get the best care and treatment they deserve.
Thank you for the presentation. So really kind of related to this slide, how do you see the future of sort of these cost impacts and things like that, especially as we're pushing it down to the system, sort of at the point of care? I just recently had an experience with my doctor where something wasn't going to be covered, and she had no idea how much it was going to cost, and really we didn't know where to start to like figure that out. And then, you go to the pharmacy and they can't even tell you up front until they run it. But by that point, it's like, are you not going to take the drug? So like, where do you see that transparency coming in? And then in particular, like, how do you see that maybe changing the relationship with physicians, or how do you work with physicians? Because, I know that's not something that most physicians actually want to do.
Yeah. So really fascinating. So a lot of legislation around transparency that is now mandating that both on the payer side as well as the provider side, that there's data published on this. We try to leverage that data. So particularly for pharmacy, and we work with Prime on this, there are systems that integrate pharmaceutical costs directly into the EMR. So it's real time, right? So your doctor can actually see, if I choose the brand, here's what it is. If I choose the generic, here's what it is. And boy, there might even be an alternative option for me, and those systems are advancing. I think we'll see that start to translate into medical care. Medical care at the fee-for-service level is super complex. And so even your physician who's going to go in and do a surgery might not fully comprehend what complications they may get into when they're there. There's different codes and then different payments that sort of fall out within the billing system. So it's a really complex problem. I think we'll see some commodity-based pricing of healthcare services, and we see this in certain things, right? So how many people have had LASIK surgery? Right, you're guaranteed a rate. And before I go into my LASIK surgery, I wrote a check, handed it to them, then I got wheeled back and I had my LASIK surgery. And I'll tell you, I was in and out the door in 35-ish minutes after that. So I think we're going to see commodity-based pricing for certain healthcare services, and the transparency that can provide and subsequently be used to inform patients is going to be super helpful. But the stuff in the middle, and as you grow and go up the complexity care chain, it's really going to be difficult to nail transparency in a way that people are used to, like on Amazon.
All right, we have time for one more real quick question.
I'll try to keep the answer real quick too.
I don't know if I can totally promise that, but I'm just interested in what your perception is for health systems to move to the right on that value spectrum. how many have the competencies and the interest to really take on those population-based payments, whether it's from analytics or workflow or whatever it is?
Yeah, so really great question, and I think that this is absolutely the crux of the solution. We're fortunate in Minnesota, right? We have fantastic healthcare systems that are large and have had historically investments in population health. They need to do more, and they need to do it better, and they need to do it faster. I think what we try to think about at Blue Cross is how can we support them to do that. Some of that's through payment model, but I'll tell you some of that is through services that we can offer. Data and analytics is one of those that we commonly have more investments from our company. But I'll tell you, I have 250 nurses that report to me. I have a cadre of physicians that report to me that have spent a lot of their time and careers in population health. And so our best partnerships are the ones where we're bringing the leadership together to start to collaborate on what those solutions might look like. And I think that's where we've seen the success. And we've seen the healthcare systems really responsive, wanting to go there because they actually see the value in being able to evolve their care model in a less restrictive and not tied to that fee-for-service system.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you so much, Mark. And we have our last speaker, Dr. Sami Yusuf. Dr. Sami Yusuf serves as Vice Chair of Corporate Development at Mayo Clinic International, where he's responsible for leading the development of a strategic framework to drive partnerships, joint ventures, mergers, and strategic alliances. Prior to joining Mayo Clinic, Dr. Yusuf held a wide range of leadership positions in research and development, alliance management, portfolio strategy, corporate development from small cap privately held companies to Fortune 500 public companies. In addition to his extensive experience in the life science and pharmaceutical industry, he has held an adjunct faculty position and has experience in direct healthcare delivery, and he holds an active pharmacist license. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I get started, I have two things I wanted to share with you. One is an opportunity, one is going to be a challenge. The first one is I think we should really recognize Kim and Pinar and the organizers for putting such an awesome program. Thank you. And that actually leads to the challenge, which is it's very difficult to be the last speaker after you hear all the great stuff. There's not much left for me to say, which is probably just go out and do the cocktail hour and call it a day. But since you're here to listen to me, then I guess you're bound to listen to me for that 10 minutes. I will try to do, in my talk, perhaps maybe try to do something that I think was the objective of the talk, which is trying to sort of give you a sense in terms of how, from a Mayo point of view, we are trying to look at opportunities for collaboration and innovation, and also thinking about how we bring sort of different value chains of healthcare to solve the problems that at least we see. And that's actually founded on the concept of what we call cure, connect, and transform. This is our 2030 strategy. Cure meaning the traditional way of curing patients. And when we talk about connect, it's the ability to think about how we manage, remove barriers between different sort of sectors that come together to actually solve healthcare things. And transform is trying to use data and analytics to generate new insight and knowledge that can actually be shared globally. In that context, I will try to give you some examples of some snippets of the things that we're doing around in terms of disrupting or actually transforming healthcare from within. One of the things I think we probably are going to talk about if you ever come to campus is quite a lot about platform thinking. Traditionally, the way we've tried to solve solutions is solutions are kind of done internally by company A in direct sort of competition or collaboration with company B. But the platform thinking modality thinks, say, can I actually open up such that multiple people, multiple institutions, whether scientists, physicians, inventors, producers, pharma, can they actually come together on a platform format and actually provide solution that each of them are equitably compensated for the contribution that they make. So that's sort of a mentality that we're trying to use, at least in some segments of the problems we're trying to solve, to really deal with the intractable challenges I think that has been talked about in most of the conversation today. One example to give you is really the question, the example of what we call advanced care at home. And I think it's interesting, earlier I think Frank had on a slide a little bit snippet about this. This is basically the idea of trying to deliver high acuity care at home rather than in an ICU in a hospital. And if you think about it at a high level, it'd be very counterintuitive in terms of you think that the patient needs to be literally in the ICU hospital and be taken care of. But in practical terms, it really doesn't. And then that's what we're trying to sort of show is, I think what Frank mentioned earlier, I think is very true. By actually moving the patient out of the hospital and at home and being able to support that patient digitally, you can actually achieve, as you can see, better outcomes and actually have higher satisfaction. And what is actually also interesting is, as Mayo, as most of you know, if you don't know, the needs of the patient come first. That's sort of the motto of Mayo. And beyond the patient, if you think about from the provider point of view, what that essentially allows you is to serve more patients, because now the beds in the hospital are available, and you don't have to build another tower to accommodate more needs of the patient that comes in. From a provider point of view, it likely is going to lead to lower cost because the readmission is minimized, right? There are better outcomes, and that actually delivers better value, going back to Grady's talk. So this is one example of by which we essentially, I think, now have an equivalent of a 60-bed hospital, so to speak, that actually serves patients externally. This is not without its challenges, right? In order to do this, you need to have infrastructure. You need to have, I think there are 18, if I remember correctly, there are, I think, 18 key supply chains with triple redundancies in each of the markets that you serve. So it is not a solution that is sort of a solution that is applicable everywhere for everyone, but certainly is a solution that is worth considering, and it's a good example of how, by changing a few of the assumptions that one has, how much of changes you can make in the industry. The second area I'll talk about is really what we call, we have a business within Mayo, what we call Mayo Clinic platform. And it's really a question, and I think goes back to what I mentioned earlier around in terms of transformation, is really to try to transform healthcare from within using the data and information that already we have. As this sort of table shows up, we have roughly about 10 million de-identified patient data that's available today. And the way to think about it is to say, by using a platform model, if we can make that available for scientists, clinicians, and engineers to get access to that information and combine it with the insights to be actually the exhaust from that comes out, that allows that. But however, as you can imagine, using data for innovation and for transformation is extremely challenging for a lot of different reasons. One is the question of de-identification, as you all know. The other one is actually the question of regulation in terms of making sure, and risk and information security. And this is, I think, one of the things I think we have, I think, in terms of modality, we have been, I think, very successful at thinking about technology not as an end game itself, but technology as a means to find solutions to the things that we're actually going to try to do. For example, if you look at this, peer-to-peer connection is a tool that we currently have implemented within the platform space, whereby it allows for data not to move, and hence really be compliant in terms of all the sort of regulations, particularly cross-border regulations that you have in terms of moving data, and also provides better security and better confidence in terms of making sure the de-identified data stays the same place where it does, but using a peer-to-peer connection technology to be able to allow it to have connections with other data sets, particularly, like a federated data model, or with AI algorithms that actually run on that data and generate insights that can actually be shared. The reason why I actually intentionally put this in is, I think one of the discussions we had with Pinar is to think about how things that, on the face of it, may not necessarily be healthcare related, have significant impact in terms of how healthcare transformation may actually occur. The peer-to-peer connections traditionally have been used in the financial sector, right? If you think about it, most of your banking information is probably using some sort of peer-to-peer connection security technologies. But by applying that technology in healthcare in terms of how to use data in a compliant way, and by the way, also respecting patient, what do you call them? Whatever, patient consent, such that you can actually use that data and information, but using different solutions from different verticals to actually be able to provide meaningful insight. So the platform ecosystem that I was kind of dancing around, and probably most people were wondering what this guy's talking about, is really trying to think about, if you think about data and network partners at the bottom of that sort of stack, and is really trying to create an ecosystem by using the peer-to-peer connection in each of the places where each party brings in their expertise and knowledge and be able to use that information and collaborate, if you will, on the platform to really advance what the best insights are going to be based on data. This particularly becomes extremely, I think, interesting, if you can imagine, fast forward 10 years from now, when population health becomes such a big thing. And if you can imagine that everybody gets, when you go to a doctor, the doctor takes the clinic takes a sample, and you have a genetic data available on all patients, you can quickly see how much powerful such a system becomes by making it available and by creating an ecosystem where there are actually healthcare insights and knowledge can begin quickly to actually make people have better lives, rather than, cure disease or when you're sick to go to the hospital. So essentially the paradigm of healthcare kind of shifts, if you will, in terms of learning more about disease and disease states before they actually happen by actually looking at data and data insights. This is one example, I think, to sort of think about how different sectors of value chain can come together in terms of solving a problem. I think the other, I only have two more examples and I'll stop. One example we're thinking about, and this is more in the traditional sense, but it really is, Mayo spends roughly about $1 billion in research and education. But one of the things that I think we really, really are charged with is trying to see how do we accelerate the translation of research technologies from sort of the lab to the clinic, and then hence ultimately to the patient. So some of the stuff that we're trying to do is trying to sort of think about how do we, in particular, if you think about this example that relates to cell and gene therapy. The cell and gene therapy is a really important and curative, potentially curative course of action for a lot of diseases. As you all know, there's quite a lot of capacity and technical challenges that face that industry, particularly around capacity. And one of the things we try to do is through partnerships. Again, if you think about it, it's not really about delivering healthcare now, but it's really about improving patients' lives. By partnering with, so in this case, NRI, we're able to sort of create manufacturing capacity actually in, sometime in the future, we'll be creating manufacturing capacity in Rochester that would allow us to be able to accelerate the translation of research that's being done at Mayo into being scaled up in Rochester, very close in Rochester, to be manufactured. And in particular, as you know, in cell and gene therapy, the logistical issues and the supply chain issues are very complex. And that actually improves, we believe, not only the translation, but ultimately the utilization of cell and gene therapy directly to patients. And the last thing I would say, and I'll stop here, ultimately we do all this because we want to actually bring it to the world. All of the stuff that we actually are doing is not about, no offense, but no Minnesota patients or patients in the US. It has to apply to the global world. And then our view is we wanted to create a global healthcare network centered on the patient. And an example here to think about it, and this will bring back to the real world, is because not every problem requires a new way of thinking. Sometimes some of the solutions are solutions that always existed. I started with the platform thinking, and I'm actually, if you notice, gradually going back to the traditional way of doing business. And in this case, just to give you an example, is that we just recently announced a partnership with a hospital in Mexico to assist them in terms of taking the knowledge and insight that we've gained with all the work that we're doing in terms of how do we elevate care in their local market. But that is, for lack of a better word, today is being done through a traditional means. But as infrastructure globally gets better, as regulations become, I think, more sophisticated, not more prohibitive, I think there's an opportunity for us to actually be able to deliver better care for the global world. And that's my speech. Any other questions?
All right, we'll leave a couple minutes for questions, and then it's social hour, so I don't want to take that away.
And if you don't have any questions, that's fine.
Thank you for the wonderful presentations. So, from my understanding, Mayo Clinic isn't famous for robotic surgery, and I really like a big fan of it. Could you tell more about it? Like, what the process is? I know you're in the clinical trial phase, but do you see the future and how soon that's gonna be, like to implement it?
I would be the wrong person to tell you exactly what the details of that's going to be, but it is certainly, I think, an area that I think we, there are a lot of things about Mayo, frankly, that we don't necessarily talk a lot about. It's very interesting. I joined Mayo about 2.5 years ago, and I will be honest, there's probably not a week that goes by I go like, we do this? Right. And then the short answer is I don't know what the exact answer is to that question, but I think if we can follow up, I can certainly try to find that information and get back to you.
Hi, great talk, by the way. So my question is, kind of goes back to that kind of ecosystem thing. So you have that Mayo platform, right? You invest in different software, in different new technology, but so does everybody else. So now you have like literally 20 different healthcare system with their own kind of platforms and stuff like that. And then suddenly you guys turn into almost competing, well, basically VCs, right? And so I just kind of wanted to hear your thought on those competing ecosystems.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I'll tell you a couple of ways to think about it. At least from my point of view, I think our platform ultimately will be an open platform. And I think one of the reasons that the peer-to-peer connection is going to be really, really important. By that I mean that we will make the data available for folks that want to have access to that platform to develop their AI, to train their AI, and actually to even implement the AI. This is not a closed system. This is not only intended for Mayo to develop AI, for Mayo to look at the data. It is really intended to encourage people to collaborate on the platform. You're absolutely right. Are there other platforms that are being created? Certainly. But the question is, I think ultimately, where this is going to end up is to say, where does the center of gravity gravitate towards in terms of equality of data, the infrastructure that's available to support it, and sort of the mass movement in terms of yield that you're going to get from such a platform. And we believe, and rightfully or wrongfully, we believe that I think we'll be able to attract quite a lot of movement there. In addition, I think this is public, it's in the public domain. We recently also had a federated data system with other partners, people, institutions that have same ethos in terms of bringing other data so that if you're an AI developer, you don't have to shop around 500 different data sets. You should have a large enough data set to be able to sort of train the AI, and that AI is going to be available. The key, I think, to me is to make sure that it's not a closed system. And I think this is something that I think Mayo has done an excellent job of. In addition, just if I can just add one more thing, we also have actually, it's funny, the Mayo Clinic platform also has an accelerator program whereby where we see opportunities, where we see technology and innovators that are in that space that we believe have really meaningful and strategically aligned technologies. We're going to be very keen in terms of taking them to a one-year program whereby we actually are coaching and actually getting them connected to the clinical areas, so that ultimately all of this is about solving clinical issues, right? And then so making them accessible to a wealth of scientists and clinicians that we have at Mayo Clinic. I hope that answers the question.
All right. Thank you so much. For the sake of time, I know we are running a few minutes behind, and I don't want to cut into our fun networking reception. So thank you so much, Sami. And I know there was a couple questions online as well. So to our online folks, I apologize that we didn't quite get to those, but we can certainly connect you with the presenters as well.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm not going to take much time. I want to thank Kim very much. I mean, she has played an instrumental role, and she says there's really good food out there, so I will all go. But I want to do have one reflection, which is you've seen all the speakers kind of referring to each other and to each other's slides. They have not. I can assure you, they have not seen each other's slides. So I mean, that kind of speaks to the idea that what we're trying to achieve here with the Business Advancement Center for Health. I mean, our core thinking is that a lot of the times these problems, as well as the solutions, lie in those intersections. I call them fuzzy intersections, and we really need to deep dive on that. And as you can see with our panelists today representing very different parts of the industry and the sector, and just really relating to each other's problem, that really highlights that. So thank you so much to our speakers. We want to do more events like that. BACH is a new center. We launched it in January exactly for this mission, exactly to create these kinds of conversations. So if you have topics that you want us to cover, and that we are very happy to highlight them. If you have in your organizations, if you want to bring some ideas to us, we could put together events for you and discuss new topics and ideas. The one last reflection I wanted to make is that there were a lot of reference to the financial services industry, and BACH is in the finance department of Carlson School of Management. I'm going to share with my department chair, who couldn't come here because she's teaching, but I guess we all have to take some finance classes too. So with that, thank you all very much. I want to thank United Health Foundation for the support for this event, and I guess we can enjoy some drinks and hors d'oeuvres.
Yes, thank you. A big thank you to those joining us online. I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. For those of you that are with us here in person, there are beverages and should be, I've not been out there, but should be a really nice spread of hors d'oeuvres. So you are welcome. We hope that you're able to stay. I know some of our speakers will also be joining us during the reception. So any questions that didn't get answered, sorry, hope that's okay. Feel free to continue picking their brains. Thank you so much, everyone.